Southern California's Marea Coffee fuels your body and your day by delivering coffee right to your door from MareaCoffee.com. They hand package and ship fresh roasted coffee that they source from small farms from around the world. Inspired by the action sports stars, filmmakers, and artists that have taken a turn at the roaster, Marea Coffee delivers the inspiration and great coffee. Order now at MareaCoffee.com. That's MAREA coffee.com. Hey, good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Coffee People podcast, which is part of the Roast West Coast Coffee Network and presented by Roastery Coffee Packaging. If you're a small business roasting excellent coffees, you want them showcased in an equally stellar package. You're going to find what you're looking for at roastery.com. I'm Ryan Woldt, and this is the Coffee People podcast, where we meet interesting people connected to the world of coffee. Today I'm chatting with Jared Linzmeier. He's the founder, along with his wife Deanna, of Ruby Coffee Roasters in Nelsonville, Wisconsin. I was introduced to Ruby by my cousin Dylan. Shout out to him, as he's also the one who took me to Star Lounge in Chicago for my first cup of coffee in 2011. He sat me down at the coffee bar and said, "You're an adult now. You need to learn how to drink a cup of coffee." I honestly don't think that's me paraphrasing. That might be a direct quote. Needless to say, a while back he sent me a bag of Ruby's Portage Blend coffee in a cap. It was a great revelation to discover that in my absence from central Wisconsin, a coffee roaster that not only roasted enjoyable coffees had sprung up, but they were one that cared about the coffee, their community, and their impact on the world. And they had a pretty good-looking brand that I could wear proudly. So let's get past all that preamble to the main event, which is a cup of coffee. I hope yours is full, to drink while you listen to this conversation with Jared Linzmeier, who founded Ruby Colorful Coffees in Nelsonville, Wisconsin. Obviously, I am a homer for Ruby, so this will be great. I'm from Wausau, just up the road. I wanted to get started into this show by letting everyone know who you are. So if you could tell us your name and what your company is and what you consider your role to be there.
Thanks, Ryan. I appreciate you taking the time to sit down and chat with me. My name is Jared Linzmeier, and I'm the co-owner, along with my wife, Deanna Linzmeier, of Ruby Coffee Roasters, which we started in 2013, so just about 10 years ago.
Wow, it's been a long time. I was hoping to get into a lot of information about Ruby and ask you a bunch of questions, but I'd rather start with getting to know you a little bit. I'm wondering, what were you doing before Ruby? I mean, did you have another career? Did you have an experience with coffee at some point that made you think, "Oh, this is interesting"?
So I grew up in central Wisconsin in a small town, which is more or less where I'm back at now. And I moved to Madison, and I went to the University of Wisconsin-Madison, graduated from there. So while I was in university, while I was studying, I did get exposed to a little bit of coffee culture on State Street and kind of around campus, but I didn't really, take a deep dive or anything. I remember being kind of interested in the idea of environmental economics. I took a class when I was, I think, a sophomore in college. That was really, I felt like the subject matter was really interesting, but it just didn't really kind of grab me. So I ended up studying English. And I think one of the reasons for that is that it was an opportunity to actually study a lot of different things and just spend some time thinking about, what it means to see life through different lenses, from different eras, from different points of view, and actually learn a lot about a lot of different topics. So that just kind of grabbed me. But as far as coffee goes and other careers, no, I I never really went down any other professional path. I moved to Los Angeles shortly after graduating, and I just kind of fell into the world of coffee that we know as specialty. So yeah, I literally kind of stumbled upon Intelligentsia in Silver Lake, which had not yet even opened. I remembered the logo from spending a little bit of time in Chicago. I happened to stop my bike. I was on a bike ride, happened to stop my bike, and was taking a break. And I looked over and I saw Intelligentsia, and I was like, I don't even know really what are they doing? What are they doing? What are they doing out here? And so I just went over and talked to them, and yeah, I met the cafe manager and the building owner, and basically I started working there a couple weeks later, and yeah, after that that became my path. I met Jeff Watts, I met Doug Zell, Intelligentsia, kind of leaders, and yeah, I started spending some more time with Jeff as he was passing through LA on some of his travels, and that whole idea really kind of pulled me into the idea of the kind of sourcing they were doing, and the overlay of Jeff's work on the sourcing side, and other people in the company, to be fair, and then seeing that how that played out at the cafe level, in a place like Los Angeles. It was just such an interesting, merging of all those different things.
Recent graduate with an English degree, what draws you to Los Angeles in the first place?
Well, I thought that I hated LA, and then I realized that that's just kind of, I don't know, a very sort of naive, or I mean, people can legitimately hate LA for good reasons, but in my case, it was just really a lack of exposure and a certain perspective that just hadn't really been expanded or changed. And I ended up pursuing, just followed a girlfriend out there, basically. And in my first visit, I thought, oh, this LA is really not for me, for all the reasons that people, think it might not be for them. But then I visited a couple more times, and I was like, wow, LA has all of these really unique crevices, these really, really rewards exploration. There's a lot more to it than, the Hollywood. And even the Hollywood isn't what you think it is unless you've been there and spent time there.
I always am amazed when I'm not amazed because I know why they're there, but whenever I'm in LA and I see like families with little kids down in Hollywood, and I'm just like, this is really not a great place for kids. This is not where you should take them. Take them to Legoland or wherever, but like downtown Hollywood is not it. I remember that Intelligentsia in Silver Lake as being a really tall, like red stucco building, like a big arch in the front. Maybe I'm imagining it, but it was one of the first coffee shops I went to when I moved to LA. Just going to share this because you know what it's like to move from central Wisconsin to California or to visit at that point. I remember the first thing I thought when we came to Southern California was looking around at all the different plants and just crazy looking trees and things. And my honest to goodness first thought was Dr. Seuss was not as imaginative as I thought. Like he literally just drew the shit that was out his window in La Jolla. So you start with Intelligentsia, and I'm assuming you start working there probably down on the lower end of things. How do you grow through that company, and where does that path take you?
Yeah, I think I was the company's first full-time dishwasher. So I'm proud of that.
Everyone should be a dishwasher at their company at some point, I feel like.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, I had a great time doing it. I was like, wow, this is, I had the perspective of, so I was, new to a city, and my first job, actually, I had like a very temporary job working at a small bakery, and I was adding up my, my salary and the tips, and I was like, this is not going to work. So then I got the job at Intelligentsia, and they were, and it was like it was like, okay, I can pay my bills washing dishes, and I'm going to get free coffee, and this is a great vibe. And as soon as I get tips, the tips are great. And it's like, this is going to be viable. So, my attitude was just that going into it was like, I just am grateful for this opportunity to just have this experience and we'll see what happens. And, I remember being proud of the coffees and just proud to work there, even if I was, whatever, I didn't have a big chip on my shoulder. Yeah. So I did some dishwashing. I moved on to, got trained to work as a barista. And then thankfully it was just a time of opportunity out there, for intelligentsia specifically. So they had finished building out the roastery and things were getting busier over there, so there was an opening for an assistant roaster. So I had the opportunity to apply for that role, and they decided to give it to me. So I started over at the roastery, and I did that for a while, and yeah, and then there were a lot of other experiences that came along the way where I was able to go to trade shows. I ended up moving to the Pacific Northwest, and I was representing them for a while up there as like doing wholesale support and training, and then that led me to another role where I started sourcing coffee. And yeah, I mean, basically that was my on ramp. And then fast forward to, I guess, 2013, decided to basically put all of that stuff into one bucket, my own bucket, or, along with my wife, and launch this Ruby thing.
What made you decide to leave what sounds like a relatively stable career? It sounds like you went to college and then you went to college again, coffee college, essentially. And you're in the West, you're in the Pacific Northwest, and you make a decision to do your own thing. What's the motivation behind that?
Well, one of the things is, I guess, that there are a number of factors. I mean, I was in a different place in my life. So my wife and I, we had our first child.
That seems like the
And
scariest time to start your own thing.
yeah, well, we were about to have our second child when Ruby was started. So that was, yeah, doubly scary. But I think, I was at this place in my life where I had the revelation that, I cared probably too much for someone else's company, and was like, I need to be applying this. I was 28 at the time, so I'm 38 now. I was like, I need to be applying this sort of irrational amount of care to something that is my own, so that, if it goes well, that I can be the one that benefits from that. And yeah, I just wanted to be a little bit more empowered, or I'm a little bit more in control of my own destiny. Yeah, I guess so. Wisconsin came into play in part because I felt that it would be important to have a little bit more of that control too, in the form of, ideally owning the property, where if things went well, where we could maybe expand to. But even in the beginning, so in the very, very beginning, kind of bouncing all over the place here, but we started Ruby in the house that I grew up in the garage. That was a part of it. Was like, okay, I want to be able to apply all of my thoughts about sourcing and roasting, and take this name, my grandmother's name, Ruby, that means so much to me, and kind of, the elements of why that means so much to me, as far as like, anyway, we can talk more about that, but, and do it with no overhead, and I couldn't do that anywhere else. And it's just so common where you see a company or a cafe start out, and it's just the reality of living on, the West Coast and the East Coast, and a lot of cities where you are renting from a landlord, and like, what happens 5 years later? What happens 10 years later? You got nowhere to grow to. You've got, your rents are massive.
It is an interesting thing. I live here in Southern California and I'm constantly tempted to go back into the business and open something. But that doesn't last very long because I talk to a few realtors and landlords and I go, maybe I'll just wait and see where things go. There's a cafe down the street from here. There was 1,300 square foot space, a little off topic as well. But they'd been there 30 years and they just closed because the new rent is like $12,000 a month. And that's
Wow.
before like your maintenance fees and anything like that. So you just think, you can't sell enough coffee. You can't sell enough, sandwiches to cover that and feel comfortable. So that is a challenge. You've got to really be dialed in. So was your family on board? Was your wife on board with this move to Wisconsin? I mean, that's a big, big change from the Pacific Northwest or California.
Yeah, well, she's from California, and she was definitely on board, and thankfully, she has her own business. So that helped us stay afloat in the very beginning as we were navigating the lean times. So, yeah, I have a ton of gratitude to her for that, for helping me pursue this dream and for being part of it. Yeah, she was on board. I think the idea was still kind of a lifestyle shift too, where things were a little bit more chill, slowed down a little bit more, not spend as much time sitting in traffic. Thought that we would have more space to focus on our family. Although I will say that first year, 2013, that was the year of that polar vortex thing. I mean,
Yeah.
we've had some other cold winters and cold moments since then, but that was the deep freeze. That was
Yes.
weeks. There were like 2 whole weeks below zero, I think, consecutive days. It was just, and I was like, whoa, like, I'm sorry. I definitely uh didn't portray that accurately, so whoops.
But you survived that. And if you can
Yeah.
survive that winter, the rest have been probably mild in comparison.
Yeah, they have been. And yeah, and for those that don't know, I mean, so that was 2013, and that was like the coldest winter on record in 100 years or something.
You mentioned it earlier, but Ruby is named after your grandmother. I'm wondering if you can tell us why you decided to do that. And your grandmother, in my understanding, is kind of she represents Ruby when she's out. She seems to be kind of famous in central Wisconsin to some extent.
Yeah, she goes pretty hard on the Ruby, that's for sure.
Did you create something that you weren't prepared for?
Maybe. Yeah, maybe. No, it's funny. I mean, she has more merch than I do. More Ruby merch. It's like every new hat. Yeah, she's great. So no, she lives a little bit further north, just outside of Antigo, Gleason area. So north of Merrill, a little bit further north of where you're from. So that's about an hour and a half from here. I actually got a Ruby tattoo back in LA in like 20 what year was that? I don't know, 2008 or 9 or something. 2008, I'd guess. And I remember thinking back then, it was like, I mean, look, what is a guaranteed classic tattoo that you're never going to regret? Your grandmother's name, you know? So I don't so there's that. No, but there's a lot more to it. I mean, the idea of, I feel like it's this overlay of this idea of something really, makes me think of like a Johnny Cash song, and then also of something precious, and also something nostalgic, and being on a rural farm where life is just really in front of you, and they would milk cows, and there's rusting tractors, and animals all over the place, and just like a real life. I just felt like, for me, of course, because it's so close to me, that's what it all embodies. But I also think that I felt like we could, literally but figuratively, sort of package that in a way where it would resonate with people too. It's like,
I say everybody has a grandmother.
yeah, yeah, and I think people like that about it. I think that was also at a time when, I think, comparatively in the industry, it's worth sort of taking a step back and thinking back to, things were a bit more masculine back then, in either name or in branding, and so it felt like a little bit of an alternative to that too, like a softer touch, softer approach, and felt like that carried through with our coffees too.
Well, that's interesting that you say that because I agree with you. I think that's true. But you were also launching in a place where there wasn't a lot of competition. Maybe I'm wrong, but like there wasn't a huge coffee scene in central Wisconsin. In Wisconsin generally, outside of Madison and maybe a few spots in Milwaukee at the time. So did you feel that way because you wanted it to be different from the industry, but was that potentially because you had this whole world of experience outside of where you were? I mean, did it take time for you to connect back to your roots?
Um, I guess I felt like I wanted to craft an identity and a brand that would work in all of those scenarios. That would be appealing to somebody in central Wisconsin who just wants a quality cup of coffee from something that just kind of speaks to them, but also that would, when I was some of the brands that inspired me, I remember looking at like what's going on with Coffee Collective, how they were using color and how they source their coffee. I thought that was a really cool story. I was friends with Delay at Heart and Rebecca, some of the stuff they're doing. And I mean, I could talk about other people a lot, but yeah, I don't know if that answers your question, but
No, it was just something that came up as I was thinking about it. When I go home now, I was recently home this summer, and there was 5 or 6 pretty solid, really enjoyable coffee shops in my hometown. And
mhm,
when I left there 15 years ago, there was nothing. There was there was one Starbucks, and that was a big deal. And so it was just,
mhm,
it's a different place to launch a company that has since grown and grown and grown. I will say the ruby red, whether I'm assuming, I don't know if it's intentional or not, but it does make me think of Wisconsin because obviously Wisconsin Badger colors, but also when you're driving down the highway between towns or between cities, you see barns that are all
mhm.
various shades of red or various shades of wear. And I love that color.
Yeah. Yeah, it's so cool.
I do want to get to your kind of the philosophy you brought with you and how you made it your own on roasting coffee and presenting coffee. One thing I think is unique is there is going to be a demand in that area, particularly for just a solid everyday cup of coffee. You have a motto that's kind of all over your branding and your website called Colorful Coffee. I'm wondering if you can tell us what that is and what your goals are with the coffee you roast, and the goals that you've passed down to your team.
Great. Yeah. Colorful Coffees, in short, is basically celebrating the fact that every one of our offerings has something unique. It's got a bit of flair that we try to celebrate and identify and roast in a way that shines a little bit of extra light on what makes it colorful in its own way. And those colors can range broadly, right? So I've always been the kind of person who, what is that, synesthesia, where when you taste something, you sort of experience it through colors too. And so I guess my practical way of approaching that as a cupper has always been like I'll taste something and I sort of have this sensation of, oh, this is like in the brown realm, and with a little bit of some purple and some yellow, and like I'm going to revisit it as it cools, and as it cools I'm going to try to hone in on what kind of brown, what kind of yellow, and to what degree, right? So if it's like coffee from Brazil, right now I'm drinking one of our portage blend from mostly Brazil. And so, maybe a coffee like that you'd come back to and it's like, okay, it's got this butterscotchy brown type thing. And then, that's how it works for me. But rather than sort of like inundating people with explosions of color, because I think for the average consumer, sometimes that can be a bit confusing, for example. And I think sometimes we miss an opportunity to reach somebody with a coffee because we're using colors that we feel as cuppers sort of capture what that coffee's all about, but we're creating a huge gap as we do that. So like an Ethiopian coffee, like we just recently ran out of Reko, which is a great coffee from Yirgacheffe, and a lot of people would be like, oh, okay, this is lemon and black tea and whatever, and the labels are going to be bright purple, bright yellow, and somebody might never even give that coffee a chance, because all of those things signal to them, no, this is not for me. Like, this coffee sounds like tea like, and it sounds like it's going to be, an IPA and a coffee. And I'm not into that, I don't think. But if you package it in a way where it's maybe tones down some of those colors, maybe they'd give it a try. And so I guess that's part of it, is for me, is like this idea of accessibility, trying to create some accessibility for all coffees, but also still celebrating the idea that, look, yeah, they all are special and seasonal and unique, and we roast them that way. But let's remember that coffees should be different from one another.
I like the idea of accessibility. I was part of the craft beer boom, and I remember trying to explain to people who just wanted to get their, let's say, Miller Lite, that maybe we didn't offer. I was running a bar in Madison, and saying, hey, like, I know that's your thing, and I know you think craft beer is this thing, but I bet I can find something that fits in between that you'll appreciate. And I've transitioned that belief into coffee as well, because sometimes I have a cup of coffee and I just think, oh man, no, not for me. But that doesn't mean that same roaster isn't going to roast something else that has everything that I'm looking for. I think that's kind of the beauty of that creativity, the creative part of that process, and also of sourcing. The Coffee People podcast is presented by Roastar Coffee Packaging. Roastar is a digital printing company that makes custom printed packaging for coffee products. They work with small, mid, and large coffee roasters nationwide. Go to roastery.com to learn more about their fast turnaround times, high-quality packaging products, sustainability efforts, and low printing minimums, which enable your small business to tell a really big story. If you are ready to upgrade those coffee bags, go to roastery.com. I'm going to come back around to Ruby here, but I want to take a little detour and ask you about something we have in common, which is riding bikes. I love to ride, although we do it in different ways. I just try to ride every day from here to there. I've done a few long trips, but you've taken some bigger adventures and have challenged yourself in ways that I haven't yet. I say yet because it's a goal, but you recently completed the Tour Divide. Actually, when I reached out earlier this year, that's where you were. I'm wondering if you can tell us kind of what the experience of taking a bike trip is for you, and what do you learn from a trip like that?
Well, Tour Divide is epic.
I also read you did a little journal about a ride you did around a 3-day ride around Wisconsin. Anything where you're kind of taking off and unplugging from home, I think is an adventure for most people.
Absolutely, yeah. I think the big thing is taking your stuff and staying somewhere overnight, especially outside, going out camping for one night. I think you'd be surprised. So Rivendell, Grant Peterson, they coined the term S240, sub 24-hour overnighter, and it's a 24-hour adventure, and it's amazing how getting out of your routine for a day just turns everything upside down a little bit in a good way, and gives you some perspective, and you realize how much time you're wasting on your phone, how much time things you're stressing out about, and it just gives you some breathing room. And maybe you get rained on, and maybe things don't go your way, and it makes you appreciate your comfort, and it makes you appreciate the things that do go your way. But yeah, I mean, the Tour Divide. So the Tour Divide, I guess, just to put out a few details there. So it's a race that happens on the Great Divide mountain bike route that goes along most of the route. And now the full Great Divide mountain bike route goes all the way up to Jasper, which is about 300 miles or so further north from Banff. But the ride I did started in Banff, and I was part of the Grand Depart, which is the annual race that happens the second Tuesday of June, or second Friday of June. And so there were about 200 of us out there from all over the world gathering in Banff and then riding our bikes south. And what a trip.
How far is it? I mean, how many days, how many miles?
Yeah, so the Tour Divide is more or less 2,700 miles. Depends if there are reroutes from fires or anything like that, wildfires. But Yeah, it's about 2,700 miles. Took me just over 3 weeks. The fastest people out there. I mean, Lachlan Morton is going to be putting out a film with Rafa and Easy. What is the Education First is his team. He's one of the pros. He's out there doing the Lifetime Grand Prix. They just wrapped up, I think. But so he's a pro cyclist. He's done the Tour de France, and he became kind of, he was already famous, but he did the Alt Tour one year where he was raising money, where he rode the whole Tour de France, including the connectors, but he did it on his own, like bikepacking style. So anyway, he's a total badass. He just went out and in between Lifetime races, these are hard races like Leadville and stuff. He just went out and did the divide in 12 and a half days.
Wow.
So that's the new sort of fastest time, but he did it with a media crew. So it's going to come with an asterisk. Yeah. Another person who people should check out is Jay Peterberry. He's been trying to bring awareness to the Great Divide mountain bike route and the full length. Unfortunately, he just got hit by a car in Colorado as he was trying to do it. Yeah, man. Anyway, so my experience was, I mentioned it before, but just gratitude was one of the big things that I took away from being out there for three weeks and change is gratitude for that experience, gratitude for the moments where I was just, looking around at the mountains and the scenes that so many people never get to see and that I had never seen before, and being there through the power of my own mind and body. It was just sort of a deeply humbling, really incredible experience.
If you are on a bike for 20 days, a couple of days, a month like that, you obviously have a lot of trust in the team you have back home. How did you develop, your strategy for building a team like that? What makes you feel comfortable saying, you know what, if I leave and I'm in the mountains, maybe my phone works, maybe it doesn't, things are going to work out? Or is that just a mindset where you say things will work out because they have to?
That's such a great comment. And I'm so glad you mentioned that, because that is one thing that I meant to include there too, that I've been thinking about every time I think about that. So yeah, I mean, it was great because from a preparation standpoint, it forced me to go that extra level. I've gone away for weekends here and there. I've done coffee sourcing trips. I've been away from things, but I've been available. And so this was that first time where I knew that I had to peel back another full layer of, okay, I need to empower everybody on my team in another way, and I need to trust them, but I just need to give them the tools. And it's not like I just decided overnight to go do the divide. So I had almost a year to reflect on things and to work with them on things, and just to make sure that we were doing it in a way that was responsible. I didn't want anybody to feel like I was out there neglecting my responsibilities. I wanted them to know that I trusted them and that they had my support to make the decisions that they needed to make while I was away. But yeah, I mean, that's such a hard thing for any business owner. I mean, and I'm not like an expert at it or anything, but it just starts by doing it. You just have to. It's not healthy to try to do everything yourself, and like the things. Not only that, but like it's so exciting when you get people on your team that you can go like, you know what? Okay, so there are these core things that make Ruby, and I want those things to be, structured. But beyond that, like I want other people now to bring in their thoughts, to bring in their, like when we're cupping coffees or when we're coming up with new merch things or when we're sending out emails, like I don't want to look over everything. I want people to be invested. I want people to have responsibility. I want people to, be excited to do things their way.
What was that moment like when the tour was done? When you crossed that, metaphorical finish line, so to speak, for you, was it relief? Was it joy? Was it sadness?
It was absolute relief. Um, no sadness. No, although I was kind of like, I think about how I spent a lot of time throughout those 3 weeks with like my, there's like, let's say there's this imaginary bubble of your emotions. And in order for it to pop and for the emotions to come out, you have like however many layers. I was down to a very, very, very thin or maybe non-existent layer, right? So I'd be like riding along and then I'd play a song or something, or I would just think about finishing, or I'd think about, my family, and I would just start crying. And it was just like, the threshold between an emotion, feeling an emotion, and then having that emotion processed through you into a reaction. It was all just like a blur. It's like, yeah, it was pretty wild.
That's such a wonderfully viscerally scary place to be.
Mm-hmm.
That not having that buffer where you can protect yourself, which is something we all learn to do very early on. Back to Ruby, as we're kind of falling into the second half of this chat, I wanted to ask you a question that is really important to me, which is, and I think to you, what is the role of a business like yours, a coffee shop or a roastery in a small community? And when I say small, Nelsonville is, I think, like 500 people. Am I insane in thinking that?
Um,
It's small, but like I'm not from Nelsonville, but you're from Wisconsin. I'm proud that your company is there. So how does that work for you? I mean, how do you feel about that, and how do you manage, the responsibility of being a pillar in a community?
well, it's something that I find really exciting and inspiring. It's something that I've had the great pleasure of being part of, and now watching happen in a lot of places, but especially here in Wisconsin. Watching communities go from, pretty sleepy towns. Nelsonville's a town of about 200. Officially, it's 191. And watching places like that where, a coffee shop becomes this gathering place. I mean, it becomes, I think one of the unique things too is that the people that come out that are there drinking coffee, that are there supporting it, it's a little bit different from a coffee shop in a city where, I mean, I don't really need to compare the two, but it's like they know that if that coffee shop goes out of business, there might never be another one, you know? And so I think they feel it a little bit more deeply. But, on another level too, there's this, like, when you look at an Airbnb listing, if you're going out to wherever, pretty much anywhere now, it's like one of the top three things that people will list, if there is one, is how close it is to the nearest coffee shop. And I think it's like it's where everybody wants to go. I mean, it's a place where if you're visiting a town, let's say you're going mountain biking somewhere up north in Wisconsin, it's like you go stop by the coffee shop, and maybe somebody else pulls in next to you and they've got bikes on their rack, or maybe you're talking to the barista and you ask about trail system, and some of the other things like that. So it's all of those things. For me, it's a reminder that these are the people broadly that we serve coffees to, that we roast coffees for, and I think that's a really healthy thing to remember, so that it's not just. I mean, I love getting to know some of our subscriber people that buy our coffee wherever they are, but I think in a way, it sort of holds me accountable when I go into the coffee shop, and I'm like, these are my neighbors, and I want to make sure that we have coffees. I mean, I'm not going to just like roast anything and everything, but I would like to make sure that we have coffees on our menu that I can say, hey, this one is really sweet. I think you're going to like this on your drip machine at home. Yeah. So it's a little bit of that. I mean, it's an economic driver for sure. When you look at people when they come and stay in these areas, like people are looking for a bit of an escape, whether it's from Madison or Milwaukee or Minneapolis. I mean, they come out to places like this, and the next thing you know, they're spending money at the IGA, they're spending money at the gas station, they're spending money at, all these other businesses. And so I think that's really important. Those are just a few of the things that come to mind. It's awesome to see.
Your roastery space, which had a tasting room, was closed during the pandemic.
Yeah.
I believe it was open before, but then it was closed and it's recently reopened. What has that been like? What was it like to have it closed for such a long period of time? And now that it's open, how has that changed, what you guys are doing?
So that hasn't happened
Oh,
exactly.
good to know.
What we're working on right now is opening a new space that is adjacent to the roastery. We actually got another building that's right next to where we roast coffee. The tasting room closed initially, basically out of, an abundance of caution during COVID, and then also to preserve the roastery operations to make sure those didn't get disrupted by COVID. And then as we got out of the COVID era, or that version of it, we also were growing and we ran out of space. So we just decided it was easier to keep it closed. And meanwhile, we had opened the cafe in Stevens Point, which is about 20 minutes away, and just felt like, we have all this stuff, all this staff, all these resources invested in a retail experience there. So let's just focus on that for now. But yeah, I mean, the tasting room was our original retail location, and it was that first opportunity to share our coffees directly with customers. And that was really cool, especially having it be in the space where we're roasting and tasting coffees too. And the new space is going to be in this adjacent space right next to the roastery. So it's not open yet, but we're sort of targeting, I mean, right now it's October, and I think we're targeting just sometime before the holidays.
Anytime you're building something new, there's always going to be changes to the schedule. That is the one thing I think is the only constant, is that it won't be whatever was on paper on day one. You mentioned that you have a family. I'm wondering, are they involved day to day, or are they involved with the coffee shop and the roastery operation now? Has it become a family business, or is that something you see in the future? I know your kids are young.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know. They are.
I only ask because I started working at the family restaurant when I was like 9, so it was very early on.
Wow. Well, times have changed a little bit. Yeah, I don't know. They are interested, that's for sure. They know a lot about coffee, and they've been around it a lot. So I don't know. I guess we'll see what happens.
On that note, then, you've been in coffee for more than a decade now. You've been in different parts of the country. You've been with bigger operations. You've started your own thing in a garage and have been growing since then. Where do you see coffee going? I think there's a lot of industry wide kind of speculation as what's happening with climate and with the overabundance of craft coffee shops now. I mean, do you have any thoughts on where this is all headed?
Oh man, you mean in terms of well, there's so many directions you could take it, I guess. I mean, I think what one of the things about this region that is exciting, like we've touched on a little bit with the the phase that Wisconsin and the Midwest is in, is that there still is a lot of growth that can happen here. There are still a lot of towns that don't have any coffee shop, and even some of the smaller cities that are still kind of lacking in really good quality coffee. We have this whole University of Wisconsin network where it's like, I mean, so yeah, now there's stuff in Wausau finally. Green Bay is starting to get some things, Lacrosse, there's so many other places. So I think there's still a ton of room for growth in those markets. I mean, obviously everybody's seeing the explosion of canned things and ready to drink things. Those have improved a lot. So, I think that's another area of growth, but I mean, I don't see that as being the future. It's so expensive to transport liquids and cans and things like that. I think it's a nice item that I enjoy sometimes, but I think really, the majority of people are still just brewing coffee at home.
In Wisconsin, you need hot coffee at least
You
half
need
the
hot
year.
coffee.
Yeah.
I think it's cool to see. It feels like there are more people now that are recognizing the importance of good water and just how much it can, like how much a little bit of attention to water chemistry and water quality can improve their coffee at home, and then really how inexpensive relatively it is to be brewing, world class coffee on like a $200 brewer in your kitchen.
Have you seen a transition from, this idea of coffee is just like the old term would be sludge, but like here's like a dark, thick, bitter cup of coffee that I drink every day because it's what I do. Versus, I mean, how much education has gone into that, but transitioning to like, oh, this is something I can appreciate. I think kind of beer kind of forged a path in that we started to learn language to talk about what we're
Hmm.
tasting. But I'm wondering if you're seeing that in coffee in the Midwest in particular.
Absolutely, everybody's paying attention. I mean, even the convenience stores. When I first moved back here, the coffee at the convenience stores was garbage. and and I'm not saying it's great now, but they're clearly paying attention. They're brewing better coffee in a lot of these places, and they're talking about single origins. And so I think, that can have the effect of confusing some customers. They can see, hey, I went into wherever and I got this single origin Colombia, for $2 for 16 ounces or 20 ounces. What's up with your coffee? Why is it so expensive? And I think that's great. Hopefully they are asking that question, because that opens a door for us to say, well, hey, that's great. In fact, many of our Colombian coffees, which we call single origins, are actually single farm coffees, or single producer lots, and they're micro lots. And there's a lot of work that goes into making, this coffee from this one farm have its moment in time here where we can taste what makes that very farm unique.
I would think that conversation has more weight in your location because most of the people have experienced, if not themselves in their family or extended acquaintances, somebody who lived on a farm and maybe doesn't anymore, as the small farms have been slowly gobbled up
Hmm.
by large operations. I'm just this is just me thinking out loud, but I would think that people would recognize the value of a small farm maybe a little bit more because they have more direct experience with small farming.
Yeah, I have seen that. I have seen that click in people's, you can just feel it in a conversation where sometimes I won't even realize I might have said something a certain way. And I'll see, somebody who grew up on a dairy farm, or somebody who, their family grows potatoes, and they go, oh, like, yes, I've heard that thing about that, and I appreciate that you care about it. So yeah, I think that's totally true.
Very interesting. What did I miss today? What should I have asked you about that we didn't cover? What do you want people to know about Ruby?
Huh. Well, I think I think we covered a lot of great things. I mean, you asked some great questions. I'm excited. This year we sent, now that travel has kind of opened up again, we've sent a few of our team down to source some coffees for the menu. And, piggybacking off of what I said about the kind of process of empowering some of my team for while I was gone, that was just another layer of it that was just personally really exciting and rewarding to me. And I think in this moment, we've just launched some of those coffees from Costa Rica that come from, I mean, some of them come from a farm that we've had a relationship with for quite a few years since I was there in, I think that was 2017. We've been buying the Cerro La Cruz coffees for all those years. But this year, Katie and Ashley went down to another farm. They met Alan from Don Joel. We brought in a coffee that's really pretty. I mean, we brought in two coffees from him. One of them that's available now is what is it? A yellow honey. It's a Kenya variety, which is, so it's just like really distinct and unique and fun to drink. And it's really cool for me to see what that means for them, and just to see how I have the ability to give them that opportunity, and just how satisfying it is. And now they're here drinking this coffee and dialing in the roast, and it's just such a special thing to watch happen. So that's been pretty awesome.
Since you've successfully left on an adventure once, have you already started planning the next one?
I think I think I'm good on those adventures for a little bit. I don't know. I mean, I think a lot about, there's some other rides and some other things that I'd like to do. But yeah, after getting back, I signed up. There was this event up north, just out of Anago, actually, so pretty close to where my grandma's at. And it was the Midwest Bikepacking Summit. So I was there with Ruby, talking about, like, just did the little expo thing, how to brew coffee, some easy options, some single cup options, meaning like we do instant and we do the steeped. We have the steeped offering, and then showing people how to brew like an AeroPress and stuff. And anyway, so I was there doing that. Yeah, and I signed up for initially for the longer event, and then I was like, maybe I don't. I started riding with this guy on day one, and I was like, this is kind of great. Like, I don't need to be out there all alone, and not everything needs to be epic. I guess kind of just like going back to what we were talking about how not every experience, sometimes it's just as valuable to have these kind of overnight experiences, or smaller adventures, and they can be really rewarding and fun. But yeah, I realized that I didn't have the drive to want to dig deep and just like go out and bike by myself, So yeah, we'll see. But no, it is really it is super encouraging and exciting to know that the team's got everything handled, and that I do have the ability to step away a little bit more too. So that's awesome.
Well, that's a great compliment to you and to the team. The last question I have for you, and that I have for everyone, is at some point you're going to be on the road and you're going to need a cup of coffee. You're going to pull into some place and you're going to have to order something off the menu. What are you looking for?
Almost always I drink drip coffee. Yeah. So that's the number one pretty much everywhere I go, even if I know it's not going to be great. I'll still get drip coffee. Yeah. So, it's funny going down the divide. Oh man, I drank everything in sight, any coffee in sight. But by the end, I had run out of my instant coffee. I had run out of the Starbucks Via that I had resupplied with. I had run out of everything else, and all I could find at the end was the Folgers packets, the Folgers Instant. So that's what I was down to by the time I got down to the Mexican border. But no, when I'm out, if I'm visiting a cafe, let's say a specialty shop, I love to see whatever they're excited about. Usually, I'll ask a barista if there are options, and it's like, I can tell that they're really into their menu. I'll ask like, hey, what coffee should I be drinking right now? And so, we'll see. Sometimes I'll get some, more wild kind of experimental type coffees if I try that out. But I'm always interested to see what people are excited about. But yeah, if it's just kind of any other coffee shop, usually I'll just go for something on drip and then maybe something on espresso, just to kind of see how they're doing their espresso.
I think we should bring this conversation full circle before I let you go. When can we see a Ruby coffee shop in Silver Lake?
Ruby and Silver Lake. Well, yeah, I don't know. I'm not. I wish.
I'll let you off the hook.
I wish I was funnier and I'd had like some kind of witty comment to say to that. But all I can think is, the long list of things that would make me say no.
I think that was pretty good. Perfect. Jared, I really appreciate you spending an hour with me. We went a little bit longer than I even expected. I know you got a lot going on, but I appreciate what you're doing. Anyone who's listened to the show knows that I do drink Ruby. I'm drinking a Ruby coffee right now, actually. And I'm proud that a company like yours exists in a place that I'm from.
Thank you. Thank you so much for your time and great questions. And it's always fun for me to, reflect back on how we got here, and it makes me, super grateful for where we're at right now.
Okay, some key takeaways from today's show. After learning the trade and improving his chops at Intelligentsia, Jared and his young family made the call to move to the Midwest to open Ruby Coffee. I'm sure it wasn't an easy decision, and the polar vortex that settled on the Midwest that year is one of the reasons my wife and I moved out west. Stories will be told to children about that winter. The cold was no joke. I mention that as a key takeaway because being an entrepreneur, starting a business, is a family affair. Whatever choices are made will impact everyone connected to the person who has the vision, who has the dream. Jared's family will have fingerprints all over his operation. In fact, the original roasting business started in the garage of the home he grew up in. His grandmother is the company's namesake, and it was his wife Deanna's business that provided some stability in the early years. Starting a business doesn't take a village, but it certainly helps to have one. Besides the coffee, Jared and I share a love of bicycle riding. For some of his bigger adventures, he's had to leave his team at Ruby to their own devices. That doesn't happen without a foundation of trust being built and a willingness to empower employees to grow. Someday, some of those employees will have employees of their own, and they'll be able to look back at Ruby as the reason they were confident in their ability to grow as a leader of a business, perhaps in a small town, where a coffee shop, cafe, or coffee roaster is so much more than just a place to drink coffee. Small-town cafes are gathering places that become living sounding boards for the bigger issues a community faces, and a home for celebrations, too. Ruby Coffee has a cafe in Stevens Point, Wisconsin. It's just about dead center in the middle of the state. 20 minutes south, you'll find the Nelsonville Roastery, where a tasting space is just almost pretty soon ready to open the doors. I checked in with Jared last week and they weren't quite there, but they are thinking sometime in the near future before the holidays. Keep checking the @RubyRoasters feeds on social media for updates. You'll of course find those links in this episode's podcast notes and on roastwestcoast.com, where we send out the newsletter every week. Finally, I'm a homer for Ruby because, intended or not, they pave the way for good coffee to not just survive, but thrive in their and the surrounding communities. Without them, the good coffee shops I get to enjoy when I'm home might not be there. At least they wouldn't have gotten there on the same timeline. So thank you to Jared for starting Ruby Coffee and for taking the chance. Speaking of the newsletter, did you know we have a newsletter? You should sign up for it. We send out weekly emails with this podcast, our Coffee Smarter Education pod, columns about green coffee, the industry at large, and features showcasing our favorite baristas. There are free and paid versions. The biggest difference is the paid version is ad-free, and you get discounts at Roast West Coast's burgeoning merch store. So thanks for signing up. And thanks to our great industry partners. Roastar Coffee Packaging, located just 30-odd minutes north of Ruby, creates excellent coffee packaging that tells the stories of small business coffee roasters. Learn more at roastar.com. And a big thanks to all of our industry partners, including Ignite Coffee Company, Maria Coffee, Cape Horn Coffee Importers, Zumbar Coffee and Tea, Mostra Coffee Company, Steady State Coffee Roasting, San Franciscan Roaster Company, Crossings Coffee, Acento Coffee Roasters, Camp Coffee Company, Civets Roasting Machines, First Light Coffee Whiskey, Hosea Coffee Source, Coffee Cycle Roasting, and Ascend Coffee Roasters. That's all for today. There is a cold snap a-coming. Stay warm out there. Maybe. I don't know. With a cup of coffee. This show is part of the Roast West Coast Coffee Network, and this episode has been written, produced, and recorded by me, Ryan Woldt. Always tip your baristas, and be sure to drink good coffee. Hello? Are you still there? You know the show is over, right? But since you're here, please subscribe to our paid newsletter at roastwestcoast.com. Why, you ask? Well, for starters, you'll get access to all of our podcasts ad-free. So no need to hit that skip forward button a half a dozen times anymore. And you'll be supporting not just the craft coffee community, but the creators of this coffee content. The difference between dedicating some of our life to coffee and all of it is the support of our paid subscribers. And finally, you're part of a cool club with access to all that we offer on roastwestcoast.com, including the archives, discounts on merch, and shoutouts on the show. There's more, but really, the simple best reason to subscribe is because you love coffee. You want to uplift the community and support the creators of Coffee People, ensuring future podcasts and newsletters. I can promise that those of us on this side of the microphone are eternally grateful for the support. Thank you. Hey out there, thanks for listening. Did you know this podcast is a listener and reader-supported creative effort? Some amazing listeners and readers have chosen paid subscriptions to the Roast West Coast Coffee newsletter on roastwestcoast.com. Those awesome people are part of a growing community who appreciate craft coffee, learning about coffee, and being inspired by the guests on this show. If you are able and this show has been going really well with your morning mug of your favorite coffee, please subscribe to the paid newsletter at roastwestcoast.com. Thanks for listening, thanks for subscribing, and thanks for drinking good coffee.